There are a few things that come to mind when I think of the Japanese automaker Subaru. Safety, off-roading, the WRX, and the legend that was Colin McRae. But today we're looking at something completely different. It's a fully electric SUV and it's called the Solterra. It shares many similarities with the Toyota bZ4X because these two vehicles are pretty much near on identical. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, prices for the Solterra start from roughly £52,500, which is unsurprisingly absolutely identical to what Toyota offers, and extends up to £55,500. It is also available right now only as an all-wheel drive vehicle, although I wouldn't be too surprised if in the future it does come in as a front-wheel drive vehicle, because Toyota has already started to offer that at a cheaper price point. Nonetheless, we'll be seeing how the Solterra compares to some of its competitors and to see if it's actually worth the price tag. So to kick things off, let's talk about one of its key selling points, which in my opinion is its off-roading capabilities. Indeed, over here you have got those oversized wheel arches, which are plastic and therefore protecting the paint. You've got an all-wheel drive system that's permanently engaged. You've got dedicated modes, for example, snow and dirt or deep snow and mud, and you've got 211 millimeters of ground clearance. Now, the combination of all of this meant that the Solterra was one of the very first electric SUVs that gave me fantastic confidence while going off-piste. And while I don't exactly have the perfect conditions, I do live near a farm, and taking the Solterra meant that I didn't feel at one point that I would get stuck in the mud, literally. Indeed, over here, a lot of its electric SUV counterparts aren't exactly best suited for said terrain. Now, apart from that, going on regular roads, I did feel that the overall traction was absolutely phenomenal. Indeed, the all-wheel drive system gave me plenty of confidence while cornering at speed on country roads. Better still, the overall handling characteristics and the very minimal body roll that I actually experienced for a vehicle of its class was actually quite surprising. However, it's not to be confused with the overall driver's feel, which did feel a little bit disjointed in comparison to some of the more sportier alternatives out there on the market. With that said, in comparison to some of the sportier alternatives, the Solterra was really comfortable to drive. See here, it soaked up a lot of the potholes, the anomalies and the speed bumps when I was pottering around town, and equally did an excellent job when going at speed on winding country roads. In this respect, I do feel that the suspension system has been tuned to perfection, and the manufacturer should really be commended for it. Equally, its braking performance was really impressive, and therefore gave me good amount of stopping power when required, and it also felt quite progressive, and therefore not grabby in the slightest, unlike some of its competitors. And that's due to the fact that you've got ventilated discs both at the front and rear, and these come fitted as standard. However, what isn't as good is its overall towing capacity, which is rated at 750 kilograms for both braked and unbraked trailers, which is quite surprising given its off-roading capabilities, and given that most of its competitors offer almost double that, of course, for when it comes to brake trailers. Thankfully, however, you have got a roof load capacity of 75 kilograms. Now, its disappointing towing capacity might be related to the overall performance, and here you've got a 71.4 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which combines with two 80 kilowatt motors, one on the front axle and one at the rear, which combine to output 160 kilowatts of power, or 215 horsepower, and 336 Newton meters of torque. Indeed, it's actually quite low figures given the dual motor configuration. Nonetheless, I had it tested via RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.65 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.48 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 6.37 seconds, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 3.43 seconds. Top speed is rated at 100 miles an hour, and I also experienced just 0.56 Gs of acceleration. Now, all of this combines to actually be perfectly suitable for your day-to-day needs, but of course won't compete with some of the more premium all-electric SUVs out there, which offer a more powerful dual-motor configuration. Now, I appreciate performance probably won't be up there with the list of priorities when you're looking at the Solterra, but 0 to 60 in a tested 6.4 seconds should certainly suffice for a lot of individuals. With that said, one of the most important elements is electric range, and this, unfortunately, is where the Subaru falls short. Now, you've got a 71.4 kilowatt-hour battery pack, and supposedly, according to some sources online, only 64 kilowatt-hour is usable, so you've got quite a bit of a buffer. Here, you've also got a heat pump that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range. Now, the manufacturer claims that you'll get roughly 289 miles on the limited spec, while if you go for the touring spec, which is on review, you'll get 257 miles. At least this is according to the WLTP mixed test cycle. Now, from my own mixed driving test, I actually netted a relatively disappointing 180 to 200 miles. Now, don't get me wrong, that should probably suffice for a lot of individuals, but when you look at its price and you look at its competitors, be it all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or front-wheel drive, it actually does sit towards pretty much the bottom. And in this respect, just shows that the vehicle is actually quite inefficient and can't compete with the vast majority of its rivals. So this does actually raise a few eyebrows and is a little bit worrying, considering this is Subaru's first foray in the fully electric market. You might have expected them to come out all guns blazing, but alas, that's not quite the case. Speaking about its electric range, this does actually perfectly bring me on to regenerative braking. And in this respect, you'll want to recoup energy back into the battery pack to be as efficient as possible. Now, in this respect, you have got D mode, which I'm currently in, and if I do want to enable a degree of regenerative braking, I'll simply have to flick down on the left side flappy pedal. The first time I do it, it will give me 3 notches down, and therefore if I lift off the accelerator pedal, I start decelerating, albeit not exactly at a rapid rate. If I flick down once more, I start decelerating a lot more harshly. Now, if I want to negate this effect altogether, I can flick down on the right side flappy pedal, or at least hold it down, and it goes back to coasting. Now, it is worth pointing out that in these modes, I do feel that the regenerative braking takes an extra second to kick in. So as soon as I've lifted off the accelerator pedal, it takes 1 or 2 seconds before it realizes, oh yes, we're going to recoup energy and we're going to start decelerating the vehicle. So just to try and demonstrate it, right now I've got accelerator pedal on, I lift off, and now I'm decelerating. I don't instantly decelerate when I lift off the accelerator pedal like you'd find on pretty much all the other electric vehicles. So I'm not really sure what's gone on there, be it in terms of optimization or be it because Toyota or Subaru just prefer you to drive in a certain way. Now, there is also another mode, and there's a button found towards the center console and effectively tries to demonstrate one pedal drive. Now, in this mode, I do feel it's a little bit more responsive. In other words, when I'm lifting off the accelerator pedal, it starts decelerating. However, it is worth pointing out that the vehicle will still roll. Despite it acting as if it is one pedal drive, you will still be rolling at roughly 3 to 4 miles an hour. So right now I've just lifted off the accelerator pedal and we'll start decelerating, but it's still going to roll. I'm not going to annoy the van driver that's behind me to try and demonstrate that, but you'll just have to take my word for it. Now, it's a shame over here that you do not have a true one pedal drive that can be initiated quite easily, because a lot of its competitors do offer said functionality, and it would have been appreciated if it was at least as an option in the Subaru Solterra. Of course, being an electric vehicle, you can plug it in, and here via CCS port it supposedly takes up to 150 kilowatts. Now, I say supposedly because if you do look online, you will be able to see certain sources saying that the charging curve is not that good and people are getting sub 100 kilowatts even on a DC rapid charger. I can't really attest to this, but nonetheless it's just something worth considering. Now, here it is claimed to go from 20 to 80% in just half an hour, and if you find a 50 kilowatt input, it will take you roughly an hour instead. Now, of course, you have got its Type 2 port, and unfortunately here you're limited to a 7 kilowatt onboard charger, and as such means that if you're going from 20 to 80%, it will still take you roughly 7 to 8 hours. If you're going to go from 0 to 100%, expect this figure to be roughly around 12 to 14 hours instead. As for a 3-pin input, again going from 20 to 80% will take you over 30 hours, and if you're going to go from 0 to 100%, it's going to be a lot longer, pushing at roughly 40 hours. So its charging speeds aren't exactly class leading, and the same could be said about its interior design. It's got a creaky center console, you've got hard plastic that's found towards the dashboard, and the door frames don't look all that well. Thankfully, however, you've got really nice upholstery, at least on this vehicle, which is the touring spec, and you've got some really nice soft material on the headlining, which is great if you're going to be using the sun visor quite often. This might actually have certain problems if you're going to be having, let's say, makeup on your hands, or if you have muddy hands and therefore making it a little bit more cumbersome to clean, but nonetheless, I quite like the headlining that Subaru have implemented in the Solterra. I also really love the fact that the cabin noise has been kept down to a minimum, which isn't the same that could be said about some of its competitors. And if you want a detailed breakdown of the in-cabin measurements that I recorded within the Solterra, do check out my dedicated audio review that can be found up on your pop banner, down the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, speaking of which, you have got a 6-speaker audio system that comes fitted as standard. However, in the more expensive touring trim, you have also got an 8-speaker plus subwoofer combination from Harman Kardon. In Japan, it's an 11-speaker plus subwoofer combination, just in case you're wondering, and it might be different in terms of the UK spec versus some of the other markets. Now again, if you want some detailed information about the audio system, do check out my detailed audio review, but what I'll say in a nutshell is that the Harman Kardon audio system will be a good, worthwhile upgrade, but it doesn't exactly excite throughout the sound frequency range. Now, if you do want to tinker around with the audio drivers, you'll want to navigate on the 12.3-inch infotainment system, which is actually very vivid, responsive, and intuitively laid out, albeit actually quite simplistic to say the least. If you contrast it with some of the alternatives out there from the likes of, let's say, Tesla, even BMW, it does feel quite simplistic. Nonetheless, it does provide you all the right information. Furthermore, it integrates wireless Apple CarPlay and wired Android Auto. If I'm not mistaken, wireless Android Auto will come in at a later date via future firmware update, but at the time of testing it was only available via a wired connection. Now better still, these third-party mobile operating systems feed through turn-based navigation data straight to the 7-inch instrument cluster, and therefore means that you can keep your eyes on the road rather than having to glance down towards the infotainment system every single turn. Now with that said, however, it's not as advanced as some of the alternatives out there, but it's still very much appreciated for those manufacturers that completely omit said feature. Now, I would also like to point out that the positioning of the driver's display is actually quite far back, and it might actually take quite a few people by surprise, including myself. However, after using it on a day-to-day basis, I actually found myself preferring the positioning of it. And that's because it somewhat sits between where the head-up display would be and where the driver's display would be. And as such means that when I'm looking at the road, I can quickly glance down at the instrument cluster to check my traversing speed or the safety systems that are in operation. But due to this, it means that the overall design of the steering column is a little bit elongated and further pushed out, and therefore does take away from the aesthetics. Still, I've got no real problems because the overall driving position is perfect, at least for myself as someone who's just under 6 foot, and I've got no problems when it comes to entering or exiting the vehicle either. Speaking about the Solterra's slightly different interior design, this does actually bring me onto storage within the cabin, and that's because you do not have a glove box, which will actually take many by surprise. Equally, the storage compartment that's found within the center armrest, while you have got the small little tray which is lined in fabric, once you remove that you'll find a larger storage area, but this has actually just got some harsh plastic, which just seems a little bit unnecessary given the overall cost of the vehicle. Equally, if you look towards the front of the center console, you'll find a nice little wireless charging bay, and while it will fit larger size smartphones, it is worth considering that the USB Type-A port, which is required to connect up to Android Auto, is also positioned here. So therefore, if you're going to be using the USB cable and your smartphone, you're going to have your smartphone hanging out on one of the sides, and there's no means of routing the cable in a smart and intelligent way. Just think that Subaru could have optimized the interior design a little bit better. Nonetheless, you have got 2 cup holders which are found further down the center console, and a very large area that is found underneath the center console where it also has a fabric material. Here you'll also find 2 USB Type-C ports, a small little area to place your smartphone, and also a 12-volt socket. As for the front door bins, they're pretty large and will accommodate 1 or 2 large-size 500ml bottles. Although it's worth considering that they're not lined in any sort of fabric, and due to the harsh plastic material that's been used over here, they'll be heard rattling around, which is quite annoying to say the least. The same could be said at the rear of the cabin, where the door bins are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. Thankfully, you can expand storage due to the pull-down armrest compartment, which reveals 2 cup holders. Elsewhere, you'll find 2 USB Type-C ports which are used for charging only at the rear of the center console. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot. And here you have got between 441 to 452 litres of capacity. That is when the seats are in place. There is no quoted figure when the seats are dropped down, but I do suspect this will be actually pretty large and will certainly suffice for transporting elongated goods, for example, a set of bikes, or indeed just taking your weekly shops. Now, in terms of the overall practicality, you've got that hatchback design, which is certainly appreciated, and an electric tailgate. This comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, which isn't the same that could be said about a vast majority of its competitors. Better still, you have got a flat loading bay and a pretty sizable underfloor compartment, which will suffice for placing your charging cables. In fact, over here, you can even place the removable and retractable boot load cover. Good thinking from the manufacturer. And you've also got some fixing points. However, it's worth considering that you have got 60-40 rear split folding seats where they can be only dropped down from within the cabin, so therefore you've got no release mechanism from the rear of the vehicle, making it a little bit more cumbersome to use on a day-to-day basis, and equally the fact that you do not have any sort of seatbelt runners. It should also be highlighted that you do not have a front compartment, in other words any sort of storage at the front of the vehicle like you'd find on some of its rival SUVs. Moving swiftly on, let's talk about seating comfort, and here I've got no problems at the front or rear of the cabin, and in this respect I didn't encounter any sort of lower back pain. Although it's worth mentioning that the rear seats are a little bit low and therefore you might have a little bit of discomfort on your thigh muscles. Equally, in terms of the overall headroom, for those people who are over 6 foot and sat at the rear middle seat, you'll find it to be quite limiting. And in this respect, if you look at some of the alternatives, they actually offer far better headroom. Thankfully, however, you do have a near flat footwell design, which is certainly appreciated, and the rear outer seats are also heated as standard. As for the front of the cabin, the seats are heated, and you've also got a heated steering wheel that comes fitted as standard. Now, you've also got an electronically adjustable driver's seat, which is certainly appreciated. However, if you want a memory function and also an electronically controlled passenger seat with a fixed panoramic roof with an electric sunshade, you'll want to opt for the touring spec. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about its exterior design, which I'm sure is going to divide opinions, so make sure you share your own thoughts down in the comment section below. What I'll say subjectively is that I really dislike the oversized plastic wheel arches, which are of course present on its Toyota sibling as well. Nonetheless, over here they do serve a purpose when it comes to its off-road capabilities. Now, as for the front and the rear of the vehicle, I've got no real complaints whatsoever. And as for its side profile, you have also got 18-inch alloys with covers that come fitted in the limited trim. However, in the touring spec, which is on review, you'll have 20-inch alloys, which certainly do look the part. As for your colour options, they extend from £550 up to £1,045, depending on the chosen configuration. While I'm not too fond of its exterior look, I really should commend the manufacturer when it comes to safety, and it is something that it's renowned for. In this respect, it scored 5 out of 5 stars on Euro NCAP's rigorous crash tests, scoring 88% in adult occupancy, 87% in child occupancy, and 91% in its safety assist scores. Indeed, over here you've got a plethora of driver assistance systems that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range, which is certainly appreciated. You've got adaptive cruise control, which actually works a treat of regulating the distance between you and the leading vehicle, and it doesn't feel jerky at all. You've also got a pre-collision system, driving assist, emergency steering assist, lane departure warning, which by the way does need disabling every single time you power on the vehicle due to a rather annoying Euro NCAP rule. You've then got lane centering, which actually works a treat on the motorway, giving you steering assist, and it actually does a phenomenal job in this department. You've also got blind spot monitoring system, traffic sign recognition, rear cross traffic alert, safe exit assist, and also a reverse automatic braking system, where the latter is actually quite annoying, where in certain instances it actually gave me emergency braking even though I could easily see my surroundings and was reversing at a pretty steady speed. Nonetheless, over here it's great to see a full suite of driver assistance systems that come fitted as standard, which isn't the same that could be said about the vast majority of its competitors. However, I would like to point out that some of the driver assistance systems do give you bings and bongs while you're in the cabin, and that can be a little bit annoying because there's actually no means of actually disabling it. Past all of this, I would like to mention that the Solterra is actually very easy to maneuver, thanks to its 11.2 meter turning circle, which is pretty impressive for a vehicle of its class. As for visibility, it's excellent at the front, side and rear, although it's surprising not to see a rear wiper included due to the vehicle actually being positioned to those people who might go off-road. However, it is worth noting that the reversing camera does actually have a small little washer on it, therefore making it easy to back into a space and therefore see your surroundings. On that note, you have got 360-degree cameras and front and rear parking sensors that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range. In this respect, it's not only useful when it comes to parking the vehicle, but also if you're going to be wading, or for example, if you're going to be going any sort of off-road terrains where you might not be able to see certain rocks, and therefore means that the 360-degree cameras give you a bit more of that peace of mind. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict. And who would have thought Subaru would be making a fully electric SUV? Certainly not myself. Nonetheless, it does actually tick a lot of boxes. It's actually very comfortable to drive, has got a relatively practical interior design with the use of physical buttons and a good use of technology. You've got a plethora of driver assistance systems that come fitted as standard, a good Euro NCAP score as well, and you've also got good amount of space for your rear occupants and also in terms of the boot capacity. And while its dual motor configuration won't exactly excite in comparison to some of the alternatives out there on the market, it should certainly suffice. What might not, however, is its overall electric range. See, at £52,500, it doesn't exactly compete or indeed excite most people. And in this respect, you have got far better alternatives out there on the market, some of which I've reviewed and will be down in the description below for your own consideration. With that said, it is a fully electric SUV that's actually kind of built for the off-road, and in this department I do think it is somewhat a novelty. Is it worth paying that extra premium for it? I'll let you be the judge. So do let me know down in the comments section below if you would pick the Solterra over some of the alternatives, and if the off-roading capabilities were arguably one of its biggest selling points. Now, if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.